this morning. You can turn with me to Proverbs 8. As we get to Proverbs 8, the Bible word wisdom in the Hebrew has only 3 letters that make it up. So the really amazing thing and the magnificent part of the Hebrew language, and that makes it different than English, is that the Hebrew language has a letter, and for every letter in the Hebrew language, there's only 22 of them. They don't use vowels. The 22 letters in the Hebrew language all have a corresponding picture. It's called a pictogram. You know what this is. You use it all the time. When you're at a crosswalk and you see this guy, he's not asking for a high five, right? He's trying to explain something, right? He's saying, don't go. This is not a great time to go. He's saying, stop, don't go. And then you see the picture of the guy that's walking that's saying, okay, it's time to walk. Those are called pictograms. It's a picture that represents a phrase that we understand. In Hebrew, they have a pictogram for every letter that they have. And it really, what you do is you can actually have this incredible language to be self-defined by the letters contained inside of the word. It defines itself. So let's go into the word. First of all, let me show you this word. I don't know how this is going to work without bracing this, but we're going to just do the word wise. And this is going to be used as a verb. Now, I know maybe it's been a while since you've heard the term verb or noun. We're just going to be real simple this morning. This is used for action. When you're describing the word wise, so this morning, if I asked you the question, do you have wisdom in your life? I think that we're so guilty of making this term so abstract that it's difficult to wrap your mind around what the Bible is saying. So we're going to give a definition to this. Let's go into this as a verb form first. This is meaning if I'm going to say, you are going to teach in a wise way. That would be using it as a verb form. Later, we're going to get into its noun form, which is a person, which is if you're calling somebody, wisdom taught me something, okay? Please don't let me lose you. I promise you it's not going to be like this the whole time. But please follow this because this is really neat, okay? So the way that you spell the word wise in Hebrew, the first letter, this is the name of it, it's called chet. Now, this is the part of Hebrew, it's kind of like German. It has that throat sound. So you want to make sure that your buddies are standing back about 5 feet when you're practicing this letter, but this is just simply, and I know you're probably not going to go home and memorize all these, but this is how you draw it in Hebrew. Hate, okay? The next letter is called kaf, just like we would cough, and it looks like that. Hate, kaf, and there's one more. It's called mem. Now, mem, in its final form, looks like that, minus that thing. Now, this is how you spell the word wise in a verb form in the Bible. Now, we're going to review this during the month of May. So if this is confusing, don't worry about anything. You can forget everything I've said so far, but I want you to get this. Every letter in the Hebrew has a corresponding picture. It's a pictogram. For the word chet, we have something that looks like a wall or a fence. And this just simply means to divide. It just simply means to divide. And I'm so tempted in these little lessons because there's so much to go into with this, but I don't want to go too deep and get too nerdy, okay? Because we could go really deep and be like, all right, I don't care anymore. But if you hear the word, this is where we get our H from. It has a sound, but we drop that because I guess as Americans we don't like that, so we just say, but if you look at it, that's where we get our H from. Does it kind of look like an H? So it's like a ladder or an H. That's where we get it from. But this just simply means to divide. We get to our second word, kaf. And kaf has the idea of a priest anointing somebody. And the pictogram is like that. It has the idea of a hand reaching out. And it literally means to tame, or it means something along the lines of ordaining. It's a positive word. It means to tame something or to be ordained of God. And the last word, mem, has the idea. That's the Hebrew pictogram. It's just like our M, which now you can see where we get our M from, mem. It's this, but this is supposed to be water. And the water in this case means chaos. It means chaos. So what is wise? What does it mean to be wise when we're talking about the Bible? When we read in Proverbs chapter 8 in a moment, to be wise as a verb, we're saying literally, chet, kaf, mem. What does it mean? It means to divide from tame things from chaotic things. If you have the ability in your life to be able to divide tame things from chaotic things, that is God's definition of using wisdom in your life. So how can I make this apply to me? So we're going to do this one more time, but this time we're going to do the word wisdom. And instead of a verb, I'm going to make it a noun. In other words, I'm going to make it to talk to a person. We're going to personify wisdom. In other words, if you were to hang out with wisdom, we're going to give that a name, wisdom. We're going to name it wisdom. It's very similar to this. In fact, I'll do it a little faster. This is going to be hate. You go, hate, kaf. And now you know it, mem. And there's two more letters for it. Chet, kaf, mem, we have division. We have a priest or an anointing hands reaching out. And then we have chaos with water. So we have divide. We have anoint or tame. We have chaos. And now there's two more parts to this. Remember what I'm teaching you. This is Old Testament Hebrew. The very next letter is called a vav. A vav. Chet, kaf, men, vav. Vav just simply means a hook. And a hook right here, it just simply means to secure or to hold fast to. The very last letter of this is called a tav. And a tav just simply looks like that, and it is literally the picture of the cross. So if I were to personify wisdom, remember, to be wise in something is the ability to divide, tame from chaos. If I can do that, then I'm exercising wisdom. But if I want to make it personify who I am, then what I need to do now is I need to divide not only the tame from the chaos, but I need to secure or fasten to or hold fast of the cross. That is the only way that I'll be able to actually have wisdom become who I am. If I can just only divide chaotic things from tame things, then I will maybe have a wise action. But for it to take on my personality, for it to be my very essence of who I am, I'm going to have to not only be able to divide, tame, and chaos, I have to secure myself or hold fast to the cross of Christ. This is Old Testament. This is Proverbs 8. The language that God has given us is self-defining. And if I could give us a working definition this morning of the word wisdom, I would just simply say it's something like this. If I could maybe make it into a statement, I would say this. Wisdom is the ability to divide tame things from chaotic things in the presence of Jesus. Let me say it this way. The amount of wisdom in your life, you say, how much wisdom do I have? I tried to make this a simple statement, but I fear it might have gone too deep. But let's just say it this way. The amount of wisdom in your life is directly proportional to your proximity with Christ. I'm going to say that again. You say, how much wisdom do I have? How do I know if this is fleshed out in my life? The amount of wisdom in your life is directly proportional to your proximity with Jesus. In other words, if you invite Jesus into an area of your life and his presence is there, his very presence is defining wisdom in that area of your life. Let me say it in a negative way. If you don't invite Jesus into an area of your life, it's impossible to have wisdom in that area of your life. It's absolutely impossible to be able to say, I have wisdom in the area of finances if you haven't invited God into the financial area of your life. It's impossible to say, I have wisdom in my marriage if you have not said, God, I want your presence in my marriage, in my life. It's impossible to say that I am a wise father and I have wisdom in being a father if I haven't said, Lord, I invite you in your presence into this area of my life. It gives me the ability to divide or make a wall between not only tame and chaos and see those things, but for it to become my essence, who I am, I have to securely fasten myself to the cross. In fact, I can just simply say, if I don't invite his presence into that area, I will be a fool. Proverbs chapter 8. Proverbs chapter 8. Before we do Proverbs 8, I want to give you our key verse for our sermon series. We're going to go back to this. This is Proverbs 9 and verse 10. In fact, you can hear the kids learning their verse right now. We're going to learn the same memory verse as the kids. We can do this, right? We can do this. Proverbs chapter 9 And verse 10 is our key verse for this sermon series. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So what did we just read? It says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of this word right here. This word we just spelled out. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of the personification of wisdom. It means to give personhood to wisdom. So now that verse hopefully makes more sense to you. The fear of the Lord, the understanding of his presence, the ability to know that I reverence a holy God, the ability to know who he is and that his presence is in my life. The fear of the Lord is the very beginning stages of securely holding fast to the cross and having the ability to divide tame from chaotic circumstances. It can't be done any other way. So this verse just simply says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. So I could also say it this way: I have understanding to divide tame from chaotic things. Isn't that that could pretty much clarify any problem we have in life? The ability to know whether to stay out of chaotic things. Because see, the problem is with Satan is he makes these two things look very similar sometimes, doesn't he? Sometimes he'll make the chaotic things almost appear tame, and we take the hook and we bite into it. And wisdom tells me to be able to identify chaos. Now, we're going to read Proverbs chapter 8 from the perspective of wisdom. If we had a guest speaker this morning, if there was a guest speaker this morning, that guest speaker's name would indeed be wisdom. Let's see what wisdom has to say. Proverbs chapter 8, verse 1. Proverbs chapter 8, verse number 1 says, "Doth not wisdom cry, and understand put forth her voice?" And understanding put forth her voice. Verse 2, "She standeth in the top of the high place, by the way of the places of the paths. She cries at the gates at the entry of the city, and coming in at the doors." Verses 1 through 3 could be summarized by just simply saying that wisdom is in the most visible place possible, in the most visible place in your life where you pass by the most. Isn't that an incredible thought? So wisdom is saying to you that I am shouting out to you. Maybe I could rephrase it this way. I wonder if I could say it this way. Did you know this morning that God, in his wisdom, the personification of wisdom, is vying for an audience? Can you believe this? God is screaming at you, and he's trying to get an audience for wisdom to become who you are. He's trying to get our attention, and he's trying to say, I have this wisdom to offer you, and I'm just trying to get your attention. He's vying for your attention. The Bible says in verses 1 through 3, "Doth not wisdom cry?" In other words, doesn't wisdom shout at you? I know that I need wisdom, and I could just say it this way. Out of all the languages in the world, what percentage of languages do you know? Let's use a percentage. I'm not even one, because there's a whole bunch more than 100. Right? So I am a fraction of 1%. So the majority of the knowledge in the world, I don't even know that I don't know it. Has it ever occurred to you that nothing has ever occurred to God? Ugh, kind of hurts my head. Nothing's ever occurred to God. God's never gone, oh, that's right. Oh, it's Ken's birthday. No. He knows. And you know what? There's so many things that I don't even know that I know. This world tries to make you feel like you know what you need to know. Can I just tell us, we don't know what we need to know. I can tell you this. As I was preparing this, I was thinking about having wisdom in my life. This is how slow your pastor is. This could be a long example. But I'll just tell you this. Every once in a while, I wonder who would even admit to identifying with this. Every once in a while, I text myself to remember a note when I'm out. Anybody else do this? Okay, here's the part that you may not do. I text myself. I go 407-385-9832, and I give myself my message, and I click send. I go, because I'm usually busy. If I'm doing that, it's because I'm busy, and I will forget. If I don't write it down, I forget, and I text myself, send. I put it in my pocket. Then my phone goes, boom. I go, oh, somebody's texting me. And I check it to see who's texting me. This is my level of intellect. I've had times where I've been so busy, and I've been in a position where my hands are full of paint or something, and I'm busy, and somebody calls and starts rattling off information, like an address or a number that I need to know. And I, in rare occasions, will say, could you please call me back and leave that information on my voicemail so I can have it for later? And wouldn't you believe it? I click end, put my phone in my pocket, and I go about my busy day, and they call back, and I go, who's calling me now? I have answered it before I mean, that is slow right there. That hello? Like, I haven't talked to them already. Like, they're going, yeah, I'm going, oh, I forgot our deal. I'm sorry. That's slow. I remember one time my brother drove this old beater truck he had, and we loved this thing. It was just to go pressure washing, and he did the most remarkable things in this truck. Like, he would say, I wonder if I could get down into that ditch and get out again. Want to try? I'm like, yeah, it's your truck. Let's try. I don't know. This car was so amazing. You know, this is when I lived in Seattle, so the weather was not as good as it is here. I can remember looking through the floor and going, oh, there's the ground. Okay, that's there now. All right. I was the wiper. I was the squeegee, right? Because there was no air in that thing, so when it began to fog up on the inside, like on a timer, I'd have a squeegee going, and wipe it off. We just talk like nothing happened. You know, 10 seconds later, you know, and every once in a while that wouldn't work, and you had to do it from the outside. That was my brother's job, so he would do that from the outside. And I can remember one time this truck was backing in, and I saw taillights. He had a canopy in his machine, his pressure washer and all his equipment was in there, and I saw the back of his truck coming towards me. I can remember when people would ask him what year it was, he would have them guess, and they would say 1980, and he'd go, almost. It was a 79. And I remember this thing coming back, and chocolate brown coming at me, and it's all nasty and tore up. And I thought to myself, it would be hilarious if I was playing baseball, I was playing catch with my friend. I said, it would be hilarious if I took this ball and hit the back tailgate really hard. It wouldn't matter if it dented it. That would be hilarious. I'm going to hit it so hard, he's going to think he, hit a tree or something. He'll stop and I'll go, just kidding, it was me. This is a good thought in my head, okay? As he's backing up, I remember winding up, and he's coming, and I let go of that ball. Man, worst aiming of my life. I shattered his back window. And I sat there and I went, all I know is the neighbors were looking out, and all they saw was like 15-year-old me, the truck backing up, and all they saw was me just on purpose, deliberately just shattering his back when I'm going. I sat there and I just walked up, like, I am such an idiot. I have no idea what I was thinking. That's such a dumb thing to do. And so wisdom is the ability to be able to decide and divide between chaos and tame things. Wisdom is saying between verses 1 through 3 that I'm crying out, I'm trying to get your attention. God this morning is just simply saying that I have the ability to offer you the wisdom or the ability to divide chaos from tame things, and I'm shouting it out. Notice the places that are mentioned in these verses. Number 1, wisdom is crying. Verse 2, at the top of high places. Wisdom is trying to become as visible as possible to you this morning. God's ability for you to do these things and become a part of who you are is trying to become as visible as possible for you this morning. God is trying to get you to hear wisdom this morning. He's in the high places. He's by the way of the places of the paths. That literally means, at the end of verse 2, literally means a crossroad. It's the places where roads are intersecting. And wisdom is saying, I'm crying out to all who are passing by. If you can even wrap your head around this morning, literally God is saying, I'm trying to get your attention if you would just pay attention to me. The God of the universe is vying for our attention in different areas of our life. She crieth at the gates, at the entry of the city, at the coming in at the doors. God has strategically placed himself in the path of all the places that you go in your life. And he's crying out and vying for your attention. Now, let's go back to what we said a second ago, because we want to make this point very clear. This ability, it can only happen by the presence of God in your life. Wisdom accompanies the presence of God. If the presence of God is not in a certain situation, you will not have the ability to be able to divide tame things from chaotic things. You just won't. I can remember when I was in college, and this thought of what we're talking about came into my mind for the first time. This is, 16, 17 years ago. I can remember praying in my dorm room, and I can remember saying, God, I'm desperate for your presence. I was over 3,000 miles away from home. I knew I wasn't going to go back. I couldn't afford to go back. I was there. I did not have any help. My parents did what they could for me, but I had a job. I'd go to class, then go work a job and come back and do homework at night, and I got very little sleep for 4 years. But I did it. And I remember saying to the Lord, Lord, I need your presence. And you know what? He began to reveal himself to me. And I can remember, and I don't know if you've ever had an experience like this, if you've been saved for any amount of time. I hope you have. But I got on my knees, and I remember saying to God, I said, God, I want you to make your presence so real to me that it scares me. I said, God, I want to feel you in this room. And I want you to make me as bold as a lion, that I could serve you with my life. And I don't care if it terrifies me, because you remember in the book of Jonah, when they said they began to repent, they began to put sackcloth on the cattle, man. They weren't messing around. When we get the presence of the Lord, not only do we get the ability to have wisdom, we begin to fear him because of his raw power in our lives. I don't know if it's a smart prayer or not, but that's what I prayed. God, give me this wisdom. Verses 1 through 3 is God putting an exclamation point on this for you today, saying, I'm offering it to you in the most obvious places of life. Verse number 4, he says, unto you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of man. Verse number 4 is just simply a personal invitation. You see, you know what makes our faith different from every other faith on the planet? Ours is personal and theirs is not. Jesus knows your thoughts this morning. He knows your hearts. He wants to know who you are. He's not a cruel master that is demanding an evil thought from you or an evil action from you. He knows who you are personally. And so this is not just a principle this morning, but this is indeed an invitation, a personal relationship with the presence of God. So in verse 4, he's saying, my call is to all the sons of man. Verse 5. And by the way, we go over verse 4 so quickly, don't we? But aren't you thankful that's in there? Because otherwise, it would just simply be God just kind of showing off. It would be just him saying, look what my presence does. Well, have a good day. I'm so thankful this morning that he says it's not only what my presence does, but it's what I offer to everybody. Verse number 5. O ye simple, understand wisdom. O ye fools, be ye of an understanding heart. Simply this, and I'm so thankful for verse 5 being in here, because verse 5, if you look at it very carefully, verse 5 is a progressive statement. In other words, what it means is you don't have to jump from where you are to this and say, if I don't have this, God's not going to be in my life. That's not what we're saying. Verse 5 is a comforting thought to those of us who know that we need wisdom in every area of our life, but that we don't have it. So verse 5 is just simply saying, I know where you are now, O ye simple. Verse 5, understand wisdom. O ye simple, understand wisdom. That's my kind of language right there. O ye fools, be ye of an understanding heart. You know what he's saying? Let's reword verse 5 to make sense for what we're saying this morning. What he's saying is, the area of your life that you don't have the presence of God in, you can indeed have the presence of God in. You can right now invite God's presence into an area of your life that's confusing to you. We have that ability, and it's free. We're going to look at this a little bit next week, but of course you know the famous verse in James that said that God is offering this to anybody who will just simply what? Ask. And it's free. What I'm doing this morning is the most valuable commodity known to man. This is more valuable than anything you can possibly imagine. Because if you get chaos and tame things mixed up, it doesn't matter how much money you have. We see rich people all the time that live such a chaotic life. You know why? Because they were lied to, and they thought that chaotic things looked like tame things, and they confused those two things, and they were miserable, although they had a lot of money. The ability to make a division between tame and chaotic is where true wealth is. And so what God is saying here is the most valuable principle, and it's what the entire world is looking for. Look at verse number 6. Wisdom is saying once again, hear, for I will speak of excellent things, and the opening of my lips shall be right things, for my mouth shall speak truth, and wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are in righteousness. There is nothing forward or perverse in them. They are all plain to him that understandeth, and the right to them that findeth knowledge. This is just simply saying that the wisdom of God, or the personification of God's presence in my life, will present itself in purity and in simplicity. Maybe I could say it this way. Righteousness is always simple. I didn't say it was easy. I said it was simple. In fact, when you do counseling with a Christian counselor, that is the ability a counselor needs, is to take apart the confusing parts of life. The parts of life that God's presence hasn't been in are confusing. In fact, did you know the Bible doesn't even really remedy or give you a way out for living a sinful life? Sometimes people want to live like the devil their whole life and ignore God's presence, and they come into a pastor and say, fix this. You go, you can't, man. You're going to have to cut a lot of cords to get all this knot junk off. You're going to have to just start cutting stuff by the power of God. You can't undo all that. There's too much hurt. There's too much emotion. We've confused it. We've intertwined it. You can't tell where tame things begin and chaotic things end. They're all touching each other. It's like a big old bowl of spaghetti. Man, there's got to be a time where we just start cutting all that out and say, God, I need your presence in here from this day forward, and you can heal the hurts that I've gone through, but I need you to clarify things for me moving forward. If you think through verses 7 through 9, which is just simply this, it's the purity and simplicity of wisdom. Let's tie together other parts of the Bible that may make my point this morning. If I'm right in my definition that the presence of God is what brings the reality of knowing how to divide tame things from chaotic things, if it's the presence of God that begins to make things make sense in our lives and gives us the ability to know what we should be doing, then we should be able to see that in other parts of the Scripture. Let's observe for a moment Acts chapter 2. In Acts chapter 2 was the day of Pentecost, where we saw people that were up on a stage and they began to be able to preach, and Peter gave this incredible sermon in Acts chapter 2, and we saw all of a sudden over their heads was a flaming fire, and they began to speak in a language, and the people that were in the audience were all from different countries. They were from different regions. And the person that was up on stage began to speak in their language. And you know what? By the time it went from their lips to by the time it got to each individual person's ears, it made sense to them. And they looked at each other and they said, isn't he a Hebrew? Aren't we a Chaldean? And they began to say, it would be like this morning if I was an American, I was speaking English, and I looked over, and Des was from China, and Kevin was from, I got to think of something, Honduras, and Steve was from Germany, and we had Becky from Russia, and I'm speaking English, and all of a sudden you see a big flame of fire come on my head, and you're like, wow, is that guy on fire? And I'm speaking English, and you're like, wait a second, I understand him. But here's the craziest part of Pentecost. You look to your neighbor who you know is not from the same place you're from, and you go, are you getting this too? And they're like, yeah. What can we learn from that? It's because when you personify this, when you're securing to the presence of God in your life, he will give you the ability to make distinctions between tame and chaotic things. So you cannot decipher the presence of God. You cannot take apart the presence of God from wisdom. The more presence of God you have, the more wisdom. 2 Timothy 1:7, I'm sure we all know this very familiar verse. For the Lord hath not given us the spirit of fear. You know what fear is to me? Let me give you a definition of fear. Fear is taking chaos and tame things and combining them. That's what fear is. When you take chaos and what you think or what you perceive to be a tame thing, and those two things intersect, that's fear. As soon as those two things come together and those form one thing, it forms fear. You know why? Think about the scariest movies you've seen. I don't know what kind of movies you watch, but you've seen a movie at some point in your life that scared you to death. You ever see a movie, you get done with it, you're like, I shouldn't have watched that. I remember one time I saw a movie, this was the dumbest thing I've ever done. Well, that's a big statement. It was a stupid thing. I remember before I got married, I had an apartment by myself. And I was sitting there, and I thought, man, I'm going to watch the scariest movie I can, because this isn't going to happen after I get married. So anyway, I watched this movie, and I was by myself, and it was the middle of the night. I was exhausted from moving. I was into this apartment. I remember I watched this movie, and I was by myself in the middle of the night. I'm going, yeah, this is my reward from working hard. I've earned this, right, you know? And I'm sitting there, and I watched this movie, and for the first time in my life, I got done with the movie, and I didn't even want to move. I was like, I guess no one's going to take it out. You know when the credits roll, and the worst part of that was the screen went mostly black, and the room got even darker. I'm like, that was bad. I should have taken it out before that part. And I remember the first time in my life, shows you how long ago it was. I remember taking the VHS tape out. Yeah, that kind of story. And I put it outside my house. I was like, you are not sleeping under the same roof I'm sleeping on. You ever had that kind of a movie? That was that kind of, I was like, I should not have watched that. And I remember, you know what was so scary about it? It took things that were tame, you thought were okay, and it brought chaos. Think about it. Every scary scene you've ever seen, is these two things intertwining. Something you thought was okay wasn't. That's why, think about it. In those movies, they always use the innocent person, the little kid, the innocent whatever, and it turns and you're going, oh, I didn't see that coming. Yeah, that's what makes it scary. If it was a big grizzly bear and you're like, I didn't see that big bear, growling at me. Yeah, you did. That's obvious. No, it takes the tame thing and it makes it chaotic. This is how it works in our life. This is what Satan does. He takes the things that look tame, but they're actually chaotic. They form together and they create fear in your life. But the Bible says in 2 Timothy 1:7, for God hath not given us the spirit of fear. But what does the rest of the verse say? But of love and of power and of what? A sound mind can divide those two. Do you get it? If I don't have the presence of God in my life, I'm not going to even know that I'm looking at something that's chaotic. And we wonder why we can't get past and get this joy in our life. And God's saying, man, I'm screaming from the top of the roads. I'm screaming at the intersection. I'm screaming at the gate that you go by. I'm in the busiest part of the city. I'm here vying for your attention, and you haven't invited me in, and my presence cannot change you. So verses 7 through 9 are very simple. It's just the purity and simplicity of wisdom. Verses 10 through 12 tell us the value of wisdom. Look at this in verses 10 through 12. He says, receive my instruction and not silver. That's what we were talking about a second ago. Receive my instruction, not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. He's saying, don't live for silver and gold. That's foolish. Now, I want you to notice in this verse, he's not saying that obtaining silver and gold is foolish. I think that's actually rather smart. Protects against inflation, right? But what he's saying is, if you think that silver and gold can make a difference or a division between tame and chaotic things, you're a fool. Because if you don't have this part, gold and silver is not going to help you. I grew up in Seattle, most of you know. And there's a name in Seattle that I grew up with knowing, and some of you may know this name. The name is Kurt Cobain. Anybody know that name? Kurt Cobain was the leader of a grunge group called Nirvana. And he was a big deal when I was a kid because he grew up in Seattle where I grew up. And so he got in that underground Seattle. I actually have some friends that I grew up with right now that are making their way through the music thing in Seattle. And it's just a big deal when you finally break in. It's a pretty big deal. And Kurt Cobain broke into that. And his whole shtick was that he sang songs about people that were so confused that he started attracting people that were as confused as he was. His songs were all about, why is my life so confusing? How come nothing makes sense? And I just am so angry with it, and it produces so much fear, and I'm so confused by it all, that all of his followers had this same character trait. As Kurt Cobain began to get all of his wealth and all of his, if we could put it in the terms of the Bible, all of the gold and the silver, wouldn't you think that all of the gold and the silver would make a division here? But it doesn't. That's the lie. It doesn't. It can't. It's completely ineffective for dividing chaos and tame things. So the Bible says here, this is not a flowery poetry. The Bible is saying, receive my instruction, not silver and knowledge rather than choice gold. This is not just poetry. Because I'll be honest, when I was a kid and I would read Proverbs like this, and my pastor would read this, I would think, yeah, but I want the gold and silver too. And you know what? Now that I've lived a little bit of life, and I've been through some stuff, I get it. I would way rather have the ability to divide tame things from chaotic things than get those two things confused, produce fear in my life, and have a pocket full of gold that does me no good. Verse number 11. For wisdom is better than rubies. Let's remember our definition and reword that. It says, for the presence of God is better than rubies. That's what it's saying. Remember, wisdom is the presence of God. And all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. You know what it's saying literally? God's presence is the most desirable thing on the planet. I wish we had a little more time. I'd go into this, but the only time in the Bible that you see Jesus of Nazareth begin to flip over tables and yell at everybody, and we all know what that is, right? It's when he went into the temple and he began to yell at everybody and say, you've made my Father's house a den of iniquity. And we see for the first time the Bible uses the word anger associated to Jesus, and it's only in that circumstance that we see the word anger is associated with Jesus. It says, and Jesus was angry. You say, why? He's way against people making money. He doesn't like entrepreneurs. No, that's not it at all. God is not against small businesses. That's not why he was upset. If you think about it, in the Old Testament, God made a building as an illustration for his immense love for you. In fact, this building, the tabernacle, which became the temple, was the way for his presence to dwell with you. When they began to sell things in there, it wasn't so much that somebody was doing something in the temple they weren't supposed to do. What they were really doing is they were perverting the avenue that God had to dwell with people. They were ruining a picture. They were ruining a way for God to get to you. You want to know why Jesus was angry? Because in that brief moment, people came in and they said, I'm going to stand between you and Kevin. And God said, I don't think so. You're not going to stand between me and Kevin. I love him more than anything in the world. And Jesus got angry for the first time. He wants you. And his wisdom is just personified by his presence. And so it says in this verse, in verse number 12, I, wisdom, dwell through prudence and find out knowledge of witty inventions. This has just a way of simply saying that if you have God's presence in your life and tame and chaos do not form together and to make a partnership, to have fear, that you're going to have the ability in your life to figure out when people are trying to trick you. How great is that? And you know what? Can I just say, being in ministry, can I just be completely transparent for a second? I ask God for exactly what this verse is. I want to say daily, all the time. You know why? I love our church so much, and I love the way that God did this, don't you? God is doing something really amazing here. But you know, in ministry, a lot of the times when people are patting you on your back, you've heard it said before, a lot of times they're just kind of making a way for the knife. And you have to have the ability to understand who's after you and who's not. And I say, God, just give me the ability for my kids' sake, for my church's sake, for my sake, to know the difference between things that are tame and things that are chaotic. And verse 12 says right there, when people are trying to trick you, when people are out for you, if people say to you something that sounds good but isn't good for you, when people at work say, what do you think about what our manager just did? Do you think you should have a big old radar that goes up and goes, that person's going to get fired, walk the other way? Wisdom tells you that's not a good conversation. Somebody that's trying to trick you. That's what this verse is talking about. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence and find out knowledge of witty inventions. We're just going to cover a couple more verses and we'll be through. Characteristics of wisdom in verses 13 and 14. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Pride, arrogance, and the evil way and the froward mouth do I hate. Counsel is mine, and sound wisdom I am understanding. I have strength. He's just simply saying, these are what the things that wisdom look like when they're in your life. Verses 15 and 16. By me, that's by wisdom, kings reign and princes decree justice. By me, that's wisdom, princes rule and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. So this is simply what this verse is saying, that the presence of God is the thing that princes, that kings, that rulers of the world depend on to make good choices and good decisions. And by the way, it's available to you. Verse number 17 will be our last verse, and it just simply says this. Wisdom says, I love them that love me. Think about that. The presence of God. The wisdom to know how to decipher between tame things and chaotic things makes this declaration to you this morning. I love them that love me. Makes you kind of want to love wisdom. End of verse 17 says this. Those that seek me early shall find me. Let's boil this whole thing down with one little simple phrase. If, I'm going to give you an if, what we said earlier, if the amount of wisdom in your life is proportionate to the proximity you are with God, if that was true, in other words, if this was the presence of God, if I'm farther away, I have a less amount of wisdom. I take a step closer to God, I get greater amount of wisdom. It's proportionate to my distance from him. The closer I get to God, the more wisdom I have in my life. The further away I go from God, I say, I'm not doing my devotions today. I want this sin in my life. I want to do this thing that you don't want me to do. I want your presence far from me. Then I'm going to get confused between tame and chaotic things. But if I go to him and say, Lord, I'm tired, but I still need to pray. I want your spirit. I want that sermon on the radio. I want worship music. Fix my heart. Help me to be more like you. You're going to gain wisdom the closer you get to him. So if that's true, if the amount of wisdom in your life is proportionate to my proximity with God, then Then, the areas of life we do not invite God's presence into are the areas we will make foolish decisions. Not a deep thought, right? Let me say it again. If that's true, then the areas I do not invite God into my life, those will be the areas I will make foolish decisions. You say, I'm confused in this area of my life. My number one thing to you would be this. Invite God into that area of your life. God, I need your presence in this very confusing moment. See, I don't know what to do at work. Invite God into that area of your life. And his presence will give you wisdom. I don't know where you're at this morning. I hope this was an encouragement to you, but I know this. As I look through this thing, the definition of what we're talking about is the ability to divide, tame from chaotic things. If I'm going to make it who I am and the essence of who I am, I'm going to divide, tame, and chaotic things so they don't mix together and produce fear. And I'm going to securely fasten to the cross of Christ. I need his presence in my life so bad in every area. If I don't, I will be forfeiting the ability to have peace